Still determined to win a prize with that lawn equipment, elderly fellow? That's what a fresh recruit quipped as an aging gentleman trimmed the turf outside the garrison entrance. The older individual merely offered a weathered smile, unassuming and seemingly invisible. But when a high-ranking officer arrived moments later, stepped from his vehicle and stood at attention, the mockery ceased because the man with the lawn trimmer wasn't merely a groundskeeper. He was the commander who once guided them through combat. If you believe true leadership is demonstrated, not proclaimed, show your respect below. Every dawn at 0600 hours, personnel at Camp Bridgeford would observe him, an elderly man in faded military footwear, guiding a weathered push mower across the verdant borders flanking the barracks pathway. The machine appeared nearly as ancient as its operator, both somehow remaining operational despite the decades etched into their exteriors. Few paid him any attention. Some presumed he was simply a community retiree, performing part-time maintenance to enhance his pension. Others speculated he might be among those veterans who remain psychologically tethered to military existence. A few wondered if he suffered confusion. He never requested compensation. The installation had discontinued directly employing landscapers many seasons prior. When they outsourced property maintenance to an external firm, he nevertheless continued appearing, addressing neglected perimeters the contractors overlooked, adjusting damaged markers, collecting debris. Passers-by continued walking. "Consistency preserves mental acuity," he would murmur to the occasional person who acknowledged him. His tone weathered yet distinct like pebbles, smoothed by years of current. Young enlistees passed nearby, some acknowledging politely, most completely disregarding him, several smirking when his back was turned. "Elderly fellow imagines he's still enlisted," one whispered to his companion, "probably discharged as a basic rank and now fantasizes about importance." A sergeant recently transferred to the installation joked audibly while leading morning physical training. "Accelerate your pace, recruits. Don't force me to summon the elderly groundskeeper to motivate your performance." The older man offered no response. He simply adjusted his headwear, a sun-bleached army green cap without emblems, rank insignia, or unit identification, merely well-worn fabric molded by years of elements. That particular Wednesday morning, while maintaining the area surrounding the flagpole, he halted his equipment and assumed attention posture as the anthem played through base communications, signaling the 0800 flag ceremony. His bearings straightened, years seemingly falling from his frame as muscle memory engaged. A gathering of new recruits waiting nearby for their morning instructions noticed and snickered. One even captured an image with his mobile device, labeling it false valor before uploading it to his digital platform. The older man completed his tasks as customarily, cleaning his equipment before storing it in a modest structure near the secondary entrance. He departed the installation with identical quiet dignity with which he had arrived, offering nothing to those who had ridiculed him. What remained unknown, his identity was William Grayson, and decades earlier, he wore command insignia on his uniform, not grass residue on his trousers. He had commanded fighting units in Southeast Asia, directed rescue missions in Caribbean operations, and eventually commanded Camp Bridgeford itself during its peak operational period, but that existed in another lifetime. Now he appeared merely as an elderly man with lawn equipment, or so they believed. Rumors circulated throughout the installation about an eccentric elderly individual maintaining barracks grounds without compensation. The situation evolved into something of an amusement among newer personnel, an unofficial mascot of sorts, a harmless peculiarity they referenced during leisure hours. "There goes the lawn commander," they would remark upon his appearance, offering mocking salutes when his attention was elsewhere. The digital image gained popularity, shared among military communities with descriptions ranging from amusement to concern. Some former service members commented regarding mental health challenges, others about homeless veterans desperate for connection. Eventually, someone submitted an official complaint to installation administration. "Unidentified civilian regularly accesses installation perimeter without credentials. Potential security vulnerability. Who authorized his presence near residential facilities?" Security protocols had strengthened considerably in recent years. The era when local civilians could freely enter military facilities had long concluded. Questions emerged during command discussions. Documentation was processed. Regulations were referenced. Installation security received instructions to address the situation that Friday morning. Two junior military police approached him as he meticulously trimmed the parade ground perimeter with exceptional attention to detail. "Sir, we require verification of your installation access credentials," one stated, hand resting instinctively on his service weapon. The elderly man straightened, dabbing perspiration from his forehead with a discolored handkerchief. "Don't possess current documentation. Never previously required." "You cannot remain on installation property without proper authorization," the second officer explained, maintaining professional yet resolute demeanor. "How have you accessed the installation daily?" "Enter through the auxiliary gate," he answered plainly. "Continued this practice for 7 years." The officers exchanged glances. The auxiliary entrance supposedly remained camera monitored and secured continuously. "Sir, you'll need to accompany us to security headquarters to resolve this matter." Without objection, the elderly man deactivated his equipment and followed their direction. Inside the office, a junior officer examined his information. "You lack employment identification. Your name appears on no contractor registry. Unauthorized presence is prohibited," the officer explained with the exhausted patience reserved for confused elderly individuals. The older man simply reached into his rear pocket and presented a folded, somewhat yellowed document. A military retirement form dated 1987. "I served here previously," he stated quietly, "simply maintaining standards." General Reynolds understood. Similarly, Colonel Whitaker before him. They reviewed the document, noting the name but overlooking the rank indicated. Both Reynolds and Whitaker had transferred elsewhere years earlier. "Listen, Mr. Grayson," the officer said, "I appreciate your service history, but this documentation holds no current validity. You require updated credentials. Protocols have evolved." He received escort off installation property, his equipment confiscated under classification of abandoned materials on government property. He presented no argument, merely walked dignifiedly through the main entrance, nodding respectfully towards sentries observing with mild interest. That weekend, an image depicting his removal, equipment nowhere visible, circulated across digital platforms, captured by one of the same recruits who had previously mocked him. Responses flooded military discussion groups across platforms. "Allow the elderly gentleman his peace. What damage was occurring? He's likely seeking community, sad situation. Wager he served more honorably than those ridiculing him." But one response stood apart, straightforward and authoritative. "This individual is Lieutenant General William Grayson, former commander of the 4th Infantry Division, decorated with Distinguished Service Cross and Silver Star. I served under his command during Operation Caribbean Shield. He commanded Camp Bridgeford from 1982 to 1987. This treatment is deplorable." The comment originated from a verified account belonging to Colonel James Sullivan, current installation commander, who had been attending Pentagon conferences during the previous fortnight. Monday morning, 0800 hours, 3 military vehicles arrived in the small community adjacent to the installation. They proceeded directly to the modest neighborhood where property records indicated William Grayson resided. Military personnel disembarked and secured the vicinity with practiced efficiency. Colonel Sullivan personally exited the primary vehicle and approached the modest single-level residence where Grayson enjoyed morning refreshment on his porch. "General Grayson," he inquired, standing at the base of the worn entrance steps. The elderly man rose, recognition illuminating his features. "Colonel Sullivan, pleased to see your return." "Sir, I've recently learned about recent events. Why withhold your identity from them?" Grayson sipped his beverage, contemplating the inquiry with the measured consideration of someone who had made consequential decisions affecting hundreds. "When they fail to recognize it," he finally answered, "they remain unprepared to follow it. If you believe authentic leaders continue serving indefinitely, share this with someone who demonstrates leadership through actions." Colonel Sullivan organized an emergency assembly at Camp Bridgeford that afternoon. Communications distributed across electronic devices throughout the installation. Mandatory formation, 1,400 hours, parade grounds, complete uniform, no exemptions. Conjecture proliferated wildly. Some anticipated an unscheduled inspection. Others worried about funding reductions or deployment notices. None connected the situation to the elderly individual they had removed from the premises. At precisely 1,400 hours, with relentless sunshine overhead, the entire complement of Camp Bridgeford, from newest recruits to senior officers, assembled in perfect formation on the parade grounds, the identical area the elderly man had maintained so diligently for years. Colonel Sullivan stood upon the review platform, an expression unreadable behind reflective eyewear. Beside him, noticeably vacant, stood a solitary chair. At 14:05 hours, a non-military vehicle arrived at the field perimeter. The operator, a sergeant in formal attire, opened the passenger door with ceremonial precision. William Grayson emerged, still wearing his familiar boots and work trousers, still quiet and unassuming. The sole difference, he wore a faded navy button-up shirt rather than his customary casual attire. Confused murmurs rippled through assembled ranks, quickly silenced by stern glances from non-commissioned officers. Colonel Sullivan approached the microphone. "Attention to orders." The formation immediately assumed rigid posture. "For personnel unfamiliar with my identity, I am Colonel James Sullivan, Installation Commander. I've attended Pentagon strategic planning sessions these past 14 days. During my absence, a significant violation of military tradition and respect transpired." He gestured toward Grayson, who remained composed at the platform edge. "This individual guided troops through Southeast Asian jungles and Caribbean interventions. He authored the survival training protocols you continue implementing today. He commanded this installation from 1982 to 1987 as a lieutenant general with 3-star designation. Under his leadership, Camp Bridgeford became the exemplary training facility in the Army's southern region." Profound silence descended across the parade grounds. Understanding manifested simultaneously across hundreds of expressions. For 7 consecutive years, Lieutenant General Grayson has voluntarily maintained the grounds of this installation. Not from necessity, but because he embodies the principles he instilled in all who served under his command. A leader's responsibility never concludes. The same personnel who had previously laughed now stood rigid and ashen, gazes fixed forward, unable to acknowledge the man they had ridiculed. Colonel Sullivan deliberately approached Grayson's position and delivered a salute so precise it appeared to slice through the very atmosphere between them. "Permission to continue honoring your example, sir?" he stated loudly enough for all attendees to hear. Grayson returned the salute, emotion briefly visible in his steel-colored eyes. "Permission granted, Colonel." The unit commanders received summons forward, each saluting the man in work attire with identical respect they would demonstrate toward the current military leadership. Then, unexpectedly, a junior enlisted soldier stepped from formation. It was Rodriguez, the same individual who had shared the mocking image online. He marched forward, halted at regulation distance, and saluted. "Sir, I apologize for my comments, for my online behavior. I remained ignorant." Grayson observed him, neither anger nor condescension in his expression. "You merely described your perception, Private. However, in future situations, observe more carefully. The uniform doesn't create the warrior. The warrior honors the uniform," Rodriguez acknowledged, blinking rapidly against sunlight and emotion. That evening, as the installation resumed standard operations, a modest ceremony occurred at the auxiliary entrance, the access point Grayson had utilized daily for his self-appointed responsibilities. A bronze commemoration was installed, revealed by Colonel Sullivan personally, in honor of Lieutenant General William Grayson, who never ceased watching over us. Adjacent stood his weathered lawn equipment, retrieved from installation storage, now mounted on a simple pedestal, transformed from mockery target to symbol of humble service. The personnel who had laughed most vocally received assignment to complete the task Grayson had performed: mowing, trimming, and maintaining the areas he had attended, not as discipline, but as education. You'll comprehend the distinction between maintaining appearances and upholding standards, their sergeant informed them. The general now understands. Similarly, you will. General Grayson never resumed groundskeeping at Camp Bridgeford. His presence became unnecessary. Every morning at 0600, rotating teams of personnel now assumed responsibility for the grounds, paying particular attention to areas along barracks pathways, surrounding the flagpole, and near the memorials, all locations the general had maintained with such dedication. They performed their duties in respectful silence, often contemplating the elderly man who had completed identical tasks without recognition or reward for numerous years. When questioned whether he missed his morning routine, Grayson simply smiled. Leadership isn't about being observed performing duties. It's ensuring tasks remain properly completed, even in your absence. Colonel Sullivan established a new tradition at Camp Bridgeford. Weekly, different recruits received assignment to study General Grayson's complete service history during orientation. This one they heard while examining accounts of his battlefield courage and peacetime innovations, exemplifies honor in working attire. Private Rodriguez, whose mocking image had inadvertently facilitated the general's recognition, requested and received permission to interview Grayson for the installation newsletter. The resulting article became mandatory reading for all personnel. When asked why he never corrected misperceptions or identified himself, the general's response remained characteristically straightforward. Respect derived from rank represents protocol. Respect earned through actions embodies leadership. I sought to determine which quality this installation valued. During Veterans Day observances, Colonel Sullivan invited Grayson as the guest of honor at the installation ceremony. Though initially reluctant, he eventually agreed to address the assembled personnel and families. His entire speech consisted of a single sentence. The finest commanders lead when observation is absent. The audience rose, many openly displaying emotion, saluting the humble man who never sought acknowledgement, but had delivered a masterclass in leadership daily for 7 years. Grayson's influence extended beyond Camp Bridgeford. His narrative spread throughout the Army, then to additional branches, evolving into a case study within leadership development programs nationwide. At each day's conclusion at Camp Bridgeford, a new tradition commenced. The most junior soldier on duty approaches the entrance where the general's commemoration stands, renders a salute, and whispers 5 words Grayson once stated when asked why he continued maintaining the grounds. I never abandoned my post. Future generations of military personnel who pass through Camp Bridgeford may never encounter the unassuming elderly man with the lawn equipment. They might never hear his voice or observe his hands, calloused not merely from decades of military service, but from years of voluntary labor. Yet they will absorb his most significant lesson, that authentic leadership transcends insignia on sleeves or shoulders. It involves appearing consistently without fanfare, without expectation, and accomplishing necessary tasks. If you believe true character manifests in silent dedication and endures through selfless service, please share this story with others who understand that leadership is an action, not a position.